I'm going to be talking today about learning teaching. And apologies for the fact that this camera shows everything in mirror image. You'll just have to bear with me for this review. But Learning Teaching by Jim Scrivener. The edition I have is the second edition, although I've been exposed to, I think, all of the editions. I think there's a first edition, a second edition, and a third edition. This book is so prominent in staff rooms for language schools that I think I've worked out of various editions, all three of the editions. But the edition I actually read cover to cover was the second edition. So, right, this book I actually bought way back when I did my CELTA in 2010. When I signed up for the CELTA tutor says this is the required reading. You need to buy this book and read it before the course starts. And she gave me the name of a bookstore I could go to buy it in the town where I was living in. Because it's a specialized book. You won't find it at like Barnes and Noble, I don't think. But it's extremely popular for language teachers. So at a specialized textbook store, I was able to get it. It was this book, and it was, I think, Michael Swan I had to buy, and then one other book I don't remember. I had to buy 3 books for the CELTA. Sorry, let me back up a minute. Because of that, for years afterwards, I thought that this was the CELTA book, like this was required reading for the CELTA, and that the methodology in this book was indistinguishable from the CELTA methodology. I later found out, some years later, that actually it's not the official textbook of the CELTA course, that this was simply at the discretion of the tutors who are running that particular course. I think a lot of things are left up to the discretion of the tutors, the required reading being one of them. So, but at the same hand, by the same token, I've talked with other people who have done CELTA courses in different localities, and I'm led to believe that this is fairly common to be recommended on CELTA courses. CELTA courses, maybe for those who don't know, is a certification for teaching English to people who speak other languages. So I bought this for the CELTA course, and I used it as a reference book when I was taking the CELTA course, but I never read it cover to cover like I was supposed to. In my defense, I was doing graduate school at the same time. So I did the CELTA course during the 1-month winter break that I had. But right up until the time that the course was supposed to start, the CELTA course was supposed to start, I was still finishing up papers from graduate school. And then once you're actually on the CELTA is so intense that there's no time to do some leisurely reading. But I intended to read it cover to cover, and I kept it with me in my suitcase for the next few years after that, and finally read it in 2013, cover to cover. It took me forever to actually get through this book. I had a goal at the time of reading 10 pages a day, which was fairly doable, and it's not a huge book. I mean, you can see it's not so big, but it is, how long is it? There's a whole bunch of appendices in the back, like stuff you can photocopy. The actual text is 380 pages. So it took me a bit over a month to get through this book. Actually, I think it took me longer, because there were days when I didn't make my quota. It's easy to read. It's not like a difficult book by any stretch of the imagination, and even though this is showing up in reverse image and you can't read the text, you can perhaps still see that It's rather large size texts, broken into very manageable paragraphs, lots of illustrations, tables, and charts throughout the book. So, nothing like overly academic by any means, and yet there's a lot of information packed in. So, to fully absorb what's in every page takes a while. You've got to read it slowly to absorb it. And then after all that, after I had read it, I really had trouble speaking intelligently about it. Maybe that was an appropriate place for the long pause. I really had trouble, speaking intelligently about this book. So I wrote a review on my blog in 2013, which I'll link to in the description down below, but it wasn't a great review. I think basically all I said is the book's really useful. There were some activities I already knew, but some activities I didn't. Very easy to read, a nice conversational style. I like the fact that for the most part, Jim Scrivener is very non-judgmental in this book. It's not like you're teaching wrong and you should be doing it this way. I mean, sometimes he gets a little bit like that, but for the most part, he's like, look, here are some tools you can use. If you want to add these to your toolkit, you're welcome to them. If you don't want to use them, then fine. I'm just trying to give you more tools to use. That's at least the tone he starts out on. Immediately your defenses drop, because it's not like you're like, all right, it's not like you're gearing up to fight him. It's just like, okay, well, let me know what tools I have. Let me know what tools you can offer me, is what I mean to say. That being said, he does get a little bit prescriptive on some parts, particularly like teacher talking time, when he comes down hard on that, in a way that a lot of new teachers are resistant to. And even now, after years of teaching and teacher training, some of his prescriptions against teacher talking time, even though they're well accepted in the CELTA and well accepted in the community, strike me as a little bit, I don't know. For example, one of the things he advises not to do, and one of the things that's quite widely accepted in the teaching community, is don't do the running commentary. So don't be like, okay, where did I put my eraser? Here it is. Why did I leave it over here? I'm always leaving it over here. Okay, so what are we doing now? He says, no, don't say that. It's unnecessary teacher talking time. But I thought, well, but what's the harm really? I mean, imagine you're looking for your eraser. And most teachers, especially most new teachers, will do the running commentary because they're afraid of silence in the classroom. So it's something teachers will tend to do naturally. And isn't it better than dead air in the classroom? And if the learners are picking up some of that incidental language, then why not? I mean, I know the argument against it is that too much useless teacher talking time is just going to confuse the students or cause them to switch off completely. But, to a certain extent, I just feel like it's part of like being a human being in the classroom. And if you, I don't know, it's the kind of thing you would normally say in those situations where you're trying to cover the embarrassment of you don't know where your eraser is at the moment. And it could be good input for the learners. Those kind of, and sorry, I don't want to get too much into this debate because I know there's a lot of arguments to be said on both sides of it. But those kind of prescriptive things, like you shouldn't be doing this, those raise up my defensiveness a little bit. But by and large, the book is just like, here's some extra tools. You can use them if you want to. And in that case, it's very useful. And in fact, there's even sections of this book entitled like Toolkit. So, here are all these extra activities that you can add to your repertoire. But yeah, what was I saying? Right. I find it hard to talk about this book intelligently because even after having read it cover to cover, I found it a little bit hard to put it on active recall. I mean, there's just so many activities, and if you're reading through this, like you're reading through a normal book, meaning starting on page 1 and just going through cover to cover, as you read it, you're like, okay, well, that's a really interesting activity. That's a really interesting activity. But then you get to the end of the book, and it's like, what did I read again? I know there are lots of interesting ideas in this book, but I can't really remember what they were. And that's perhaps maybe why this book is more suited as a reference book than something you would read cover to cover. I've actually read this twice, cover to cover. The second time was after I had been teaching for many years and had done the Delta and had gotten put on a teacher training course that was not the CELTA, but it was designed to be a CELTA equivalent. And I was working with CELTA tutors, CELTA qualified tutors. No. What do I want to say? People who were qualified to be tutors on the CELTA, who were running this equivalent course. And I was brought in as the new person on this course. They had been doing this for years. I had no idea what I was doing. And so there was a book there, Scott Thornberry's CELTA course book. And I said, oh, can I borrow this? I'll read this and this will help me. And they said, well, you can if you want. But they said, do you know what would actually be better for you to read? Is just read Learning Teaching by Jim Scrivener. And I said, I read that book. I said, but I'll read it again. So during the time when I was learning my ropes as a teacher trainer, I read through this book again. Actually, I didn't get all the way through it the second time. But I got really close. I don't know. What did I get through? I think I got up to page like 324, so I was only like 50 pages away from the end. And then I shelved it again I shelved it without completing the second reading of it because at the time I was busy doing Delta Module 3. And that needed my attention, I felt. But essentially, I've read it through twice now. The last time I didn't get through the last 50 pages, but nobody cares about that except for me and the Sorry, starting again here. The camera, I'm having trouble with my camera. Yeah. So I've read it. What was I saying? I've read it one time and then almost through the second time, and I still find it difficult to remember in detail what's in the middle. I mean, there is so much in this book. He talks about all the different methodologies. He talks about classroom activities, classroom management, how to do a speaking lesson, how to do a reading lesson, a listening lesson, writing, how to analyze grammar, talking about grammar. I mean, I was surprised, actually. One of the things I noticed when I was rereading this book after I had done the Delta was how much Delta level stuff there actually is in here, even though it's an introductory book. But a lot of the techniques that you practice or learn at the Delta are in this book. But there's so much stuff in here that you just don't remember it after you've read it. Yeah, so for example, he's got this part on phonology here, which the phonemic chart here, and some activities. And I've gone through this. I've done the stuff. I've done it twice, but I don't. Yeah, I don't really think much of what's in this book stuck in my long-term memory. That being said, actually, let me talk about where this book is useful. I found this book very useful for teacher training, both when I was working on the teacher training course and when I was working as a senior teacher. Because you would watch a lesson and maybe there was something very obvious for classroom management that the teacher was not aware of. And I would just photocopy some pages from this book and say, okay, read this section of this book, because it's very good on the basics of classroom management and the task setup. Just like setting up a task, having the students do the task, and then doing feedback on the task. Just very basic things like that. I think there's even a diagram of the task cycle somewhere in here. And then reading and listening lessons. Oh yeah. So this is on the task cycle. Sorry, I know this is in mirror image again, but you get the idea. Another thing that this book is really useful for, actually, is just the resources in the back. And this is actually something I don't make use of enough. When I was going through my reread of this book and going through these resources in the back, I thought, oh yeah, I forgot all about these. I should be making more use of these than I am, because there's a bunch of useful stuff that you can photocopy and then just bring into the classroom. And again, apologies for this being backwards, but you can maybe see, even if you can't read in detail, some useful stuff to just photocopy and take into the classroom. This is the second edition. Different editions have different activities in the back, I think. Also, I think what's in the second edition, but maybe is not in all of the editions, is the observation tasks, which are, these were useful for me. Well, they can be useful for you as a teacher if you just want to observe other teachers on your own and set yourself tasks. More often, I think the way they're used is by schools for directing professional development. So at some of the institutions I've worked at, some of these observation tasks would be assigned to teachers. And then when I was a senior teacher, I used some of these to suggest to teachers tasks they could do when doing peer observations. So how many observation tasks are there? There's 10 observation tasks at the end, and then 20 photocopiable resources at the end. So yeah, I guess in summary, a very useful book, lots of very useful common sense information here that's very useful to a new teacher. I found it took me a long time to get through it cover to cover. Part of the reason I never finished the second reading of it, and the first time why it took me so long to get through it the first time, even though it's laid out in very easy to understand format with lots of pictures and very visually friendly. It's just so much to absorb in here when you're reading it. So it's a book that maybe deserves to be read and reread, but also sitting on your desk to use as a reference. So if you're going to be doing a listening lesson, go back and look at the parts about listening. Usually this book is given to new teachers, but there's a lot of advanced stuff in here which I had completely forgotten about because there's just so much stuff in here that you do just forget about stuff. So yeah, maybe I'm due for another reread of this one of these days. But for now, I think that's, well, no, actually, sorry. I'll make a few more comments on this. One of the things that I actually do remember sticking in my mind from this book was his section on Cuisenaire rods. I think that's how they pronounce it. Cuisenaire. Part of the reason that sticks in my mind is because he goes on about it for so long. So page 311. This is in his toolkit section. And he goes on about it for like so many pages, which is a lot more than he gives to a lot of the other techniques in here. And I remember thinking when I read this the first time, what are Cuisenaire rods? What is he talking about? They are, I think they're small colored blocks of wood or plastic that come in different lengths. They were appropriated into language teaching in the 1970s during the heyday of the silent method. But since then, made inroads into the classroom generally, I think, but then became sort of short-lived. I guess after the 1970s, maybe into the 1980s, people were using them, but they are a bit... I've never worked in a school where there were Cuisenaire rods that were available for general use by the teacher. They were specialized things that some of the older teachers had, that the older teachers were usually very protective of because they were an increasingly rare resource. I have seen them used effectively, and I have seen them about since I've read this section in Learning Teaching. But I always, it would be interesting to see if they still figure as prominently in the third edition, which I've not read cover to cover. Yeah, maybe I should check that. But I thought that was a little bit strange how much prominence he gave to Cuisenaire rods, given how inaccessible they are to a lot of teachers nowadays. Anything else I want to blabber on about while I'm here? Some of the pictures with the thought balloons are very eye-catching. Yeah, no thought balloons on this one, but you get the idea. So I wonder who illustrated this. Does it say? I wonder if he illustrated it himself. So yeah, that helped to break up the text and help to make certain sections more memorable since there's so much information in here. Here's another example of the illustrations. Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty much all the intelligent commentary. That's all the commentary I have for this book. You'll have to judge for yourself how intelligent that was. I'm going to sign out.